The final chapter on JFK. Chapter 3, Segment 4, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Welcome back. This is the third chapter in our series. This is called Prime Suspects. The prime suspect we're going to be looking at is Lee Harvey Oswald. Of course, the Warren Commission, with its 7 distinguished members, in 1964, in an 888-page report with 26 non-attached volumes, reached the conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole killer of John F. Kennedy. And for that reason alone, Oswald should be considered a prime suspect. The theory as to why Lee Harvey Oswald killed President Kennedy falls into 2 camps, both related to his visit to the Soviet Union. The first camp says that Oswald left the military as a young man, went over to the Soviet Union, became indoctrinated there, came back, and then was some type of special agent, and using a $19 rifle killed Kennedy to accomplish some purpose for the Soviet Union or for Cuba. The second theory follows a similar lot in that Oswald, as a former Marine, went to the Soviet Union, came back to the United States with his wife and child. He wanted to return either to Cuba or to the Soviet Union, and he figured he would do something spectacular, which would allow either of these 2 countries to take him in. The theory goes that his visit to Mexico City in the fall of 1963, trying to get some type of immigration document so he could travel into either of those 2 countries, the theory falls apart when one realizes that although Lee Harvey Oswald had been reading various articles and doing research on Marxism, which is an idealistic theory, and although he had read about it and he went to the Soviet Union to see how Marxism was actually incorporated into a country, he saw that the ideal of Marxism versus the actual implementation in socialism were completely opposite. It was of no benefit. There were no great ideals. There was a working class of people, and instead of having capitalists like we have in the United States, they have Soviet party leaders who hold the same positions and acquire all of the assets and get all the benefits that capitalists get. He pretty quickly determined that the commoner in the Soviet Union was far less off than a person in the United States. Plus, they did not have the free speech rights nor the opportunity to advance to become something better if they put their effort in. The theory doesn't really go that well, and when you look at the actual documents and what the people say about Oswald's return, it doesn't hold water at all. Starting in 1961, when in the Soviet Union, he and his wife wanted to get out. And he went to the U.S. Embassy, and he was trying to get out, and he worked for more than a year trying to get back to the United States. People that were interviewed in the United States after all of this, after the Kennedy shooting, all said Lee Harvey Oswald did not want to go back to Russia or the Soviet Union, nor Cuba, and his wife certainly didn't because she loved it in the United States. Anyone claiming that he wanted to leave and go back to these countries is spouting nonsense. And the key example, aside from everything else, is a report issued by a United States immigration officer. The guy's name is Boris Klesem. He says, 20 months of the realities of life in the Soviet Union have clearly had a maturing effect on Oswald. He stated frankly that he learned a hard lesson the hard way, and that he had been completely relieved of his illusions about the Soviet Union at the same time that he acquired a new understanding and appreciation of the United States in the meaning of freedom. But when Oswald returned to the United States after being over there and learning his lesson, he wanted to write a book about his adventures over there and what he learned and what he now appreciated by returning to the United States. So the claim that Oswald was doing this as a Soviet agent or trying to get back to one of these countries is absolute, utter nonsense. Beyond that, the entire time that Oswald was ever interviewed or anyone talked to his family or friends, they all said that he was a Marxist, and he made a big distinction on that, versus a socialist or communist. Now, when we look at motive, aside from the Warren Commission determining no motive, it is actually the opposite of any type of motive anyone attributes. There is no evidence to support it. But let's look at opportunity. That exists. Lee Harvey Oswald got a job in the Texas School Book Depository in October of 1963, just a little bit more than a month before Kennedy's travels to Dallas. By being in that building, clearly gives him the opportunity to shoot Kennedy if he was there that day, and he was. So if we look at motive, opportunity, and means for Lee Harvey Oswald, he definitely had the opportunity, being present in the building where the motorcade went right past in exactly the area where the murder occurred. We get to the last part of investigating a criminal suspect, and that is means. That's a little bit iffy. There is a rifle that is attributed to Lee Harvey Oswald, and we're going to get into fingerprints or no fingerprints, whether he ordered the rifle because it was ordered under a different name or not. But the fact that there is at least an indirect connection between Oswald and that rifle means we have to look at it. We can't abandon it. He is definitely a prime suspect based upon opportunity and the potential means to commit the crime. After what we've just gone through, it is clear that although Lee Harvey Oswald at this point in time doesn't necessarily have a known motive, he certainly has opportunity and means if somehow he can be connected to the criminal evidence in the case. So for those reasons alone, Oswald is up on the chart as a prime suspect. We're now going to look at our next prime suspect in our next segment. Looking forward to seeing you then. So long.